Hey guys, what's up? So in the previous video we talked about many parameters that we can find here in our visual settings, and now we are going to talk about the output tab where we can define a lot of parameters concerning how the image will be rendered. So first of all, we have to choose a resolution, and this is very important for the image quality because it controls the number of pixels that the image will have. So if you choose a resolution where you have more pixels, the image will probably have a better quality, but it can take longer to render. And if you choose a resolution where you have just a few pixels, then the image won't have a very good quality, but the render will be very fast. So it's important to evaluate in which situation you can choose a specific resolution. So in most cases, I basically leave the full HD resolution here selected because it's a very good resolution for producing images that can be sent through email and they can be viewed in normal monitors. So the full HD resolution is basically the most common resolution for TVs and monitors. So it's a good way to go when you are not concerned with printing. And if you take a look here, if we choose this option, we will have 1920 pixels per 1080. But if you would like to produce a very sophisticated image with more quality, and this will work better as well if you are thinking about working with post-production, you can also choose the Ultra HD, which will give us a much better resolution. So you can see now that we will have 3840 per 2160. And this is actually a resolution that you can also find in TV screens, and they are also known as 4K. So this is a very good option to go when you need a more professional image and perhaps you would like to work with Photoshop or any other post-production software. And of course you can still choose other resolutions. We have resolutions that will give us actually a lower number of pixels. For example, we can use the window resolution and the render will consider the size of the image here that we are seeing in our Enscape frame buffer. We could also choose this 1024 per 768, which is an old monitor screen resolution, and also the HD, which is also a small resolution for our current monitors. So most of the time I basically use Full HD, especially for testing, and Ultra HD for the final render. But we can also use the custom option here, and this can be actually very useful if you are planning to print your images, and in these cases we really need a very high resolution for our images. So if that's the case, it's important that you check any kind of chart that can help you to define the exact resolution for your print size, and then you can basically set up the pixel values here. And of course, in any kind of resolution, it's very important to remember to set the save frame by clicking here. So now we are actually seeing the final render resolution here, and we can make better decisions concerning the image size. And when we use the custom resolution, we can also choose the aspect of the image. So for example, we could change this landscape proportion to a portrait one. So if we invert here these values, so for example, if I type here 1080 and here 1920, we now have a portrait proportion, and of course our composition now is much different. And there are also other situations where we can use this custom resolution. So for example, if we are producing an image for Facebook or Instagram, maybe we would like to choose a specific resolution here. So for example, if we are rendering an image for Instagram, we normally use a square format, for example 1080 per 1080, and this can be a good image to be posted in Instagram. Sometimes we can also use a more vertical proportion, for example 1080 per 1350, and this can work also very well for Instagram and other social platforms. Okay, so let's now do a real test here by producing an image to be published in Instagram. And let's say that I would like to work with a square ratio. So in this case, these two values need to be the same. And instead of using this low 1080 pixels value, we can choose a higher one because, as I've said, if we have a higher amount of pixels, we will have a better quality for our image. So let's choose here, for example, 2500, and I'll use the same value here. So now we have a square ratio for our render. Okay, so once we choose our resolution, we can choose our file format down here, and we can choose this file format also after the rendering, as we did in the previous videos, but we can also choose here in advance, which can be a good option for your workflow. And here we can choose between the PNG and other formats, and most of the time I use the PNG or the JPEG. The JPEG produces a lighter version of the image with a very small size that can be very suitable for sending emails and so forth. The PNG is a heavier image and it can also store the alpha channel. So normally if you are planning some kind of post-production, you can choose the PNG and it's a good option. And down here we have the Open EXR format, which is a more professional format, especially for post-production, because it can store more information and it's actually a very heavy image. So you can think about if you plan to work in a more sophisticated way. And the TGA is similar to the PNG. It can also store the alpha channel. So depending on your workflow, you can choose one of these options. For now, I will leave the PNG. And now I can basically produce my final image. However, before rendering, it's important to be aware that when we change the resolution and the ratio, probably the composition of our image will be affected. So before producing the final image, maybe I will think about a better place for our camera considering this new proportion. So I can, for example, pan our building and maybe position it somewhere around here. We can always think about the rule of thirds or any other kind of composition grid to help us in this process. And I think that here it's quite fine, and maybe I can also move this person here to the right. And I think that now we have a nicer composition than before. So finally we can render our final image. And it's important to remember to go back to the main tab and increase our rendering quality. And then finally, we can click here in our screenshot button. We can now choose a folder to save our file. And I'll call this image Villa Savoye Render. And remember that we had already chosen the format here, so it's the PNG and also the resolution. So all the parameters that were set up are now being saved in this image. So now I can basically save the image, and after just a few seconds we have our final image produced to be published in Instagram with the appropriate size for this.